Tonight, 3 OPP officers under investigation after a Toronto man accuses them of police brutality.
I just want justice for what's happened to me.
He says the video shows excessive force. We'll explain the charges he now faces stemming from the ordeal and how the OPP is defending what the officers did.
It's just been extremely, it's made me really proud as well as a Canadian to see my community support us.
Plus, as disaster grips Libya, how families here are coping while trying to mobilize help.
Anytime you're opening up more space to the public, and namely their pets, I think could only be beneficial.
And pushing for more pup space. What's behind the latest urgency to finally build a plan for off-leash parks? Good evening, I'm Chris Glover. A Toronto man says he was a victim of police brutality after an incident last weekend left him bruised up and traumatized. A video circulating online shows Michel Foucault on the ground pleading for help outside a bar in Aurelia while police punch him multiple times and taser him. The OPP says the use of force was appropriate, and the video does not show the full story. Anam Khan is live in the newsroom with the latest on this one. Anam, walk us through the allegations and what police are saying about them.
Foucault says he was the one who called police to the bar that night over an altercation he witnessed. But he says when the officers showed up, he was shocked when he was the one who was arrested and charged. Now, he wants the officers to face the consequences.
It's been nearly a week since Michel Foucault went to a bar with his friends in Aurelia. He says what started out as a fun night took a drastic turn, leaving him with scars that he's now learning to cover.
This one right here is when I was dragged to the ground. And this one too, right here.
Right there. Was there blood gushing out of there?
Yeah, that's the one where I was concerned about the concussion possibly.
Videos shared on social media show Foucault calling for help as 2 officers pin him to the ground, taser him, and punch him outside the study hall pub in Aurelia. Foucault says he himself was the one who called police there that night just before 3 a.m. As he was leaving the bar, he says he saw an altercation.
And then the police come, they're not helping me. They just seem like they're not caring.
He says when police arrived, they didn't investigate the altercation, instead turned their attention on him, accusing him of being intoxicated.
Why am I being arrested?
Because you're intoxicated.
I'm sober.
Now you're resisting.
No, I'm not. I'm sober. Why are you punching me?
Foucault admitted to CBC he had been drinking that night, but he insists he wasn't intoxicated. He has now been charged with public intoxication, resisting arrest, and 2 counts of assaulting a police officer with intent to resist arrest. In a statement, the OPP said, "This video captures only a portion of the event and shows the responding officer selecting the most appropriate use of force option to address the immediate situation, exposing the subject, public, and officer to the lowest level of risk." The OPP says it's given the case to the Toronto Police Service Professional Standards Unit to investigate, and one of the officers involved has been reassigned to administrative duties in the interim. While the investigation continues, Foucault says he just wants accountability.
And I just want justice for what's happened to me.
I reached out to the study hall pub to get their side of what happened that night, but the bar refused to comment. We also checked with the Special Investigation Unit. That's the police watchdog that investigates when people have been killed or seriously injured by police. But the SIU says the man's injuries were not serious enough to fall under their jurisdiction.
Okay, Anam, thanks a lot. CBC's Anam Khan reporting live in the newsroom tonight. Shifting now to the ongoing efforts to end the housing unaffordability crisis in Toronto. Today, both builders and affordability advocates were applauding the federal government's move to axe the GST from the construction of new rental apartments. Still, many worry it's just one step in creating enough development. Dale Manukduk takes a closer look.
We realize it's the right time to step up.
Addressing the entire Liberal caucus in London last night, the Prime Minister announced a change aimed at incentivizing purpose-built rental housing.
We will see GST and PST, or HST, eliminated from a large number of apartment building constructions across the country.
This is great news. It's been a long time coming. Those of us in the housing space have been advocating governments at all levels for this for many, many years.
The GST was part of the Liberal Party's election platform in 2015, but scrapped 2 years later. Rental prices are now at record highs across the country. For decades, purpose-built rental housing has taken a backseat to condominiums due in large part to the amount of time it takes to get a return on investment.
What this has done is taken out a front-loaded cost, the HST, or in the case of the federal government, the GST, and remove that cost that will incentivize and provide a foundation for the finances to work.
When you get a large enough project, it can make up that gap of the impact of interest rates. So it really depends on the scale of the project, the location of the project, and a whole other a series of financial implications.
A recent report focusing on Canada's rental housing made 10 recommendations to deal with the crisis. One of them was to eliminate the GST. One of the participants says there's 9 more to go.
Federal support for an acquisition strategy to allow nonprofits and co-ops to buy existing rental housing that's reasonably affordable, preserve it as affordable housing as nonprofit housing. Things like increasing access to housing benefits to prevent homelessness. And one of our key recommendations is doubling the supply of community housing.
Meanwhile, Premier Doug Ford says the province will do its part by removing its portion of the HST. The moves will likely take years before an increased supply reaches the market, but the hope is it will have a ripple effect.
There have been times in the City of Toronto where we've had less than 1% rental vacancy. The best form of rent control is a 7% market vacancy. That means that you actually have landlords competing for tenants. That's what we want to see. But because for decades we've had almost zero new rental construction, it's a very tight market.
In addition to the tax cut, the feds announced it will require municipalities to repeal or amend exclusionary zoning policies in order to access the government's Housing Accelerator Fund, something Toronto has already done. Dale Manukduk, CBC News, Toronto.
So as Dale was saying there, the province is also removing its portion of the HST from new rental builds. And now Ontario's housing minister is asking cities what else needs to build more homes. Lorenda Redekop has more on what he's looking for.
The cranes are evidence homes are being built, but not on pace to meet the provincial target. And the province still hasn't implemented most of the recommendations from its Housing Affordability Task Force, a year and a half after they were presented. Today, the housing minister sent a letter to mayors of all the cities with provincially set housing targets, looking for feedback on the 74 task force recommendations and asking them to list their top 5. He asks for a response by October 16th. If not, saying they'll lose their eligibility for the Provincial Building Faster Fund.
I think we are consulting on a consultation that was from another consultation.
The founder of a housing advocacy group worries that despite the tough talk and 1-month deadline, it'll still mean a slow process.
Look at this report, look at what the recommendations are, and take actions to finally legislate.
The province also has a tracker online of recommendations it has implemented, though some with amendments, such as the recommendation to allow 4 separate units on single-family home lots, subject to tighter rules and changed to 3 units. He hopes mayors won't oppose the changes.
This really requires urgency, and we have seen again and again from municipal governments that they are not willing to make the changes necessary to honor the spirit of what we need for our long-term future prosperity.
The NDP opposition says it hopes the minister's letter will make a difference towards the goal of 1.5 million homes over 10 years. But it's skeptical about why this is coming out now.
The Conservatives have ignored the Housing Affordability Task Force recommendations for well over a year. It's only been now, when we have a Greenbelt scandal and a corruption crisis.
The province didn't give a timeline for implementing more recommendations. An initial response from Toronto Mayor Olivia Chow's spokesperson is that they've seen the letter and need some time to better understand it. Lorenda Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
Earlier this week, Premier Doug Ford's 2018 mandate letters to his cabinet ministers were finally made public after they were leaked to the media. And tonight, the province's top bureaucrat confirms they're investigating that leak. A senior government official tells CBC News that the Secretary of Cabinet has launched a forensic review into how The documents got to global news. The Ford government has fought to keep the mandate letters secret for 5 years now. Repeated rulings ordered the letters released to CBC Toronto under Ontario's Freedom of Information laws. But the government appealed all the way to the Supreme Court, and the court is expected to issue its decision in the fall. Meanwhile, after suspicion from some in the opposition, a spokesperson for Ford denies the Premier's office orchestrated the leak to distract from the ongoing Greenbelt scandal. Now I want to get you up to speed on that renewed push to get a dog park master plan for Toronto. You've no doubt seen or maybe stepped in evidence of the city's dog population skyrocketing in recent years. Well, many dog owners and non-dog owners alike are complaining there's not enough public space for all the pooches. Greg Ross has more on what's being called for now.
It's becoming more and more common in the city to see dogs running free in areas they aren't supposed to be.
I have been noticing more dogs off leash.
As a result, the city is getting more and more complaints about it. And the city says in the last couple of years, there has also been an increase in dog attacks against people and other dogs.
Even if you trust your dog, you can't trust every other dog that's around you.
Toronto Centre City Councillor Chris Moyes says the solution is to create more space for dogs.
We have over 300,000 dogs in the city of Toronto and growing. We have 75 off-leash parks in the city.
Next week, Moyes plans to bring a motion to the Infrastructure and Environment Committee with a plan he believes will fix the problem.
An off-leash master plan for dogs.
Moyes says it will include taking a look at all existing parks around the city to see if they can accommodate an off-leash area for dogs, and he says it will include regulations for new parks.
When we are designing parks, I think we need to consider having off-leash parks in those new parks.
The plan also calls for better maintenance, something dog owners say is desperately needed at many of the existing dog parks.
A lot of the dog parks are really dirty. A lot of them don't have proper filtration, irrigation.
It doesn't even seem like people come in to maintain it monthly. I don't know how often. It seems like once a year they'll come in and kind of check the fountains working.
Moyes says he has support from his colleagues on City Council, and it's clear this motion is also supported by dog owners.
I think anytime you're opening up more space to the public, and namely their pets, I think it could only be beneficial for sure.
Moyes will present his motion to the committee on September 20th. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
All right, to sports now. And after a terrible week for the Jays trying to clinch the playoffs, finally tonight, a glimmer of hope.
And a fastball hit to deep left field. He got it!
All right, there it was. Vladimir Guerrero Jr.'s 3-run homer was all they needed to take the win over the Boston Red Sox, with the final score 3-0. Tonight's game puts an end to the team's 4-game losing streak, and the Jays are now 1 game behind the Seattle Mariners for their league's 3rd and final wild card spot. 16 degrees and clear skies as we look live at the city tonight. Riley Laychuk is in for Colette. Hey there, Riley.
Well, Chris, another dry day thanks to high pressure across southern Ontario, but that is going to change. We'll talk about that. Look at some of our afternoon highs across southern Ontario. Fairly seasonal for this time of the year. 20s along the Golden Horseshoe, Toronto, Hamilton, into the Niagara region. Even into southwestern Ontario, enjoying sunny 20-degree highs this afternoon. That's kind of where we're shooting for as we head through the day on Saturday. So here's some of our wake-up temperatures. Getting down to 10, 11 degrees. Good bit of cooler up through Cottage Country and into the Peterborough, Ottawa region, but generally we're looking at pretty seasonal conditions as we head through Saturday. We'll start to see some cloud cover building in and into the afternoon, 20s once again, and by the time we get to the early part of Sunday morning, still temperatures around 14, 15 degrees. So as we look at our outlook for the next 24 hours or so, down to 11 tonight overnight in the GTA. Clear skies, winds staying light, and we'll see the winds staying light tomorrow through the afternoon, but we will start to see some clouds building in. We'll talk about that when I come back.
All right, Riley, we'll see you then. A significant labor update tonight. The Metroland newspaper group says it is seeking bankruptcy protection and will stop publishing print editions of its weekly community newspapers. Those papers are distributed for free across Ontario, bundled with advertising flyers. Metroland says that business model no longer works and will be moved to online only. More than 600 people are being laid off without severance. That's more than 2/3 of the company's company's workforce. It'll continue to publish its daily papers in 6 cities. Metroland is a sister company of the Toronto Star, and the Star's operations are not being affected. Welcome back. A story of devastation that's playing out on the other side of the globe is hitting very close to home for a lot of people in our region tonight. Thousands are dead in Libya, and thousands more are missing after floods hit earlier this week. As Ali Chiasson reports, the Libyan community in the GTA is trying to heal through mobilization.
Grief knows no border, from the worst-hit communities on Libya's coast to Toronto.
So my entire family is actually in Libya. I have siblings who are still in Libya. It's been very difficult for us to get in touch with them.
To Brantford, Ontario.
It was very difficult to get in touch with our family in Derna.
Ayat Maina watched the news coverage from her Brantford home. She couldn't reach anyone because the flooding took out the power grid in Derna.
It really took all day before details started to come out.
Like how her aunts, uncles, and cousins attempted to flee to the rooftop of their building, where they spent an entire night in the rain, watching their neighbors' buildings collapse, hoping theirs would hold up.
One of my aunts attempted to get onto the rooftop, and the floor collapsed. Her son was pushed out, swept away, and he spent hours in the sea, and he was able to cling to something, and he was able to walk back out, and he walked to one of his relatives' homes. But his father, my aunt's husband, did not survive the collapsing of the house.
Meanwhile, in Toronto, Esra Bengizi constantly checks her phone for notifications that her loved ones are alive.
Definitely extremely anxious. I've just been monitoring Facebook constantly to get in touch with my family to see who's been marking themselves safe. So that's what I've been doing, and the other Libyans here in the diaspora as well.
I gotta say, I'm really impressed with your strength. Where does that come from?
Being Libyan entails being resilient. We've been suffering from one tragedy to another for the last century. We've had to endure colonialism, Italian colonialism. We've had to endure 42 years of a dictator and the civil war that followed that. And so I hate to say that we're used to violence, we're used to instability, but that really shows the resilience of my people. We have lots of baby stuff.
Bengizi has been organizing local Libyans in the GTA by gathering donations to send overseas.
I've been gathering supplies, and we've had drop-offs.
This work has been helping her cope.
It's been extremely humbling and extremely, it's been just so, I'm getting a bit emotional, but it's just been extremely, it's made me really proud as well as a Canadian to see my community support us, and through the different means, through monetary means, through raising awareness, and it's been incredible.
This widespread neglect.
Ayat Maina says she'll heal when Libya does.
I hope to see that the efforts to provide disaster relief in Derna continue, but also pressure on authorities to take responsibility for this, and maybe this will be a turning point to see change.
Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
Let's bring Riley back in now. And Riley, as we watch the ongoing impacts of severe weather in Libya, I know you have your eye on severe weather here in Canada as well.
Well, Chris, I wanted to go east just a little bit to talk about Hurricane Lee really quickly here. So currently a Category 1 as we head into the weekend, though. I bring this up because we could see some travel impacts as we head into the weekend, making landfall Saturday afternoon in Nova Scotia as a tropical storm, but a very strong tropical storm, almost winds at 110 kilometers an hour sustained by the time we get to Saturday. So almost hurricane status still, but we're looking at quite a bit of rain coming through as we get into Sunday. So this could have some travel impacts, especially if you're heading into Nova Scotia or New Brunswick through the weekend or even into early next week, perhaps. So as we get into the day, you can see some of this rain really wrapping around and giving quite a bit of rain through Nova Scotia and New Brunswick through into Saturday evening. Closer to home, we do have a nice sunny sky as we head into the day on Saturday, but things are changing. We'll start to see this frontal boundary here really start to move in and bring us some showers and some cloud coverage as we head into the later part of the weekend. So we're looking at some cloud cover to start Sunday, and then we start to see some of this rain start to move in. I'm thinking 2 to 5 millimeters, a pretty good bet across most of southern Ontario, but we could see some heavier pockets, especially in the southwest, the earlier in the day we go on Saturday. I'm thinking this is done by the time the morning commute begins on Monday, but we could still see some lingering showers, I think, by the time we start the day on Monday. Even by about lunchtime, I think it'll probably be pretty well cleared out. So, like I said, 2 to 5 millimeters. This model giving a 32 in London by the time we get to the afternoon on Sunday. I think that's a bit high. I think we're looking at about 2 to 5 millimeters generally across southern Ontario. So, looking at tonight's forecast, for pretty seasonal for this time of the year. Partly cloudy skies, mainly clear skies for the most part. 10 for Hamilton, 13 for Toronto, 22 tomorrow afternoon, 23 across most of the region. And that's kind of the pattern we're sticking with. After we get through those showers Sunday and Monday, Chris, we start to get a lot drier, temperatures in the low 20s for next week.
All right, Riley, thank you. A sad update for you tonight. Claude Cormier has died, and even if you don't recognize his name, you're likely going to recognize some of his work here in our city. He was the creative force behind the infamous dog park fountain, as well as the newly opened heart-shaped Love Park. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Finally, tonight we want to take you to Scotiabank Arena. That is where some dinosaurs will be hanging out over the next couple of days. And it's all for the Jurassic Park World Tour, which is roaring its way into Toronto this weekend. The dinosaurs, of course, are not real. They're operated by performers and animatronics. Even the iconic Jurassic World Jeep made an appearance. The dinos and the cast of the tour will have free reign of the arena until their last show on Sunday afternoon. All right, have a great weekend, everybody. I'll see you back here on Monday at 11. Good night.